And that cinema has a real value. And it's important, again, to remember that just because you have resources or the means, that it's not necessarily going to be great. That money does not actually equal quality. And we know this in art, but I just want to mention this, that this also translates to cinema. Money and means and opportunity is useful and can often lead to some great advances and some great opportunities, but it does not necessarily guarantee great cinema or great art. So with that, I wanted to kind of break down and talk about the state of the cinema, of the independent world today, and what this all means for us. To start with, I want to talk about the filmmaker, which is where ostensibly the independent film world germinates from. Is the ideas that people have, the films that people create out in wherever it is that they create them. The world today of film, again, just to underscore what Luke and Craig were saying this morning, is a very complex one filled with obstacles. And if you want to be a filmmaker or a screenwriter or a creative professional in some way with regard to cinema, you have to find your way. And for generations now, a couple generations now, the independent film world has been the entry into that, into the cinema world. And why is that? I mean, it makes sense. Before you're ever going to be trusted to helm an $80 million or $130 million budget with Tom Cruise sitting out in his trailer, you are going to have to prove yourself on a short film or a smaller project. Before anybody's going to entrust hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment, and you don't know what you're doing, you have to have the experience of making it on something much smaller. So independent cinema has been used as a pathway, a gateway, if you will, to get to the broader commercial world. And I mean, again, this is just common sense. And it's the aspiration of many, if not most, independent filmmakers to ultimately become one of these commercial filmmakers paid untold hundreds of thousands or millions for your work. But there's many of us who have sort of, in the last 30 years, who've become professionals or have become involved in the independent film as kind of a separate entity. It exists sort of for us separate from the commercial art world. Companies have sprouted up, and the film festival circuit, which we'll talk more about in a bit, has been created to foster the development of these and to further the audience awareness of these films. For filmmakers today, it's very unlikely that you can write a script, submit it to somebody who, through a friend, can get it to an agent who can sell it to get it to Paramount or wherever that it's going to sell, that they're going to buy it, they're going to give you the money or the opportunity to make a film and to put your vision out there. That's just a very unlikely path. It's the equivalent, if not of winning the lottery. It's like becoming a professional basketball player. The odds are just against you. So what happens is filmmakers today, and for the last 20, 30 years, have gone on smaller paths, and they're making much smaller, more intimate personal films. And for those of you who know anything about the Sundance Film Festival, which originally started off as a festival really showcasing these independent works that were sprouting up just all over the world. And there was no place to, particularly this country, and there was no place to showcase them, really, in a prestigious environment. Sundance was created, Robert Redford came on much later, and sort of helped foster this environment of showcasing independent cinema. These films began to get more popular. The independent brand, so to speak, became more popular. And people liked this idea of the not outsider art, but it was independent, it was separate, it was gritty, it was the quality stories that weren't being told in the mainstream system. So people began to be attracted to this. First the filmmakers, then the actors who saw the great opportunities here, and screenwriters, and eventually the money came. After the creative professionals came, it came the money. So what ended up happening was distribution companies began setting up specialty divisions to purchase, to acquire, sometimes to produce films that were made in this independent sphere and then distribute them to their audiences. They basically wanted to acquire this independent brand. I mean, many of you know Miramax, the company that was founded by the Weinstein company, the Weinstein brothers. They started out very modestly making documentaries like The Policeman's Ball and really simple films that they were acquiring for very low money and cutting them, turning around and making a modest profit off of them. And the more that they did this, the better they got at it, the more money they made. Eventually, it became a really sexy business model, and it became, Wall Street began looking at it saying, look at this company here that's making consistent profits. And so Disney came in and purchased it. I can't remember how much it was for. The figure 300 million pops to my mind, but that may not be accurate. And this was, 15, 20 years ago. Well, in that wake, companies like Paramount and Universal and New Line and Warner Brothers began creating their own specialty divisions. Things like Warner Independent, Fox Searchlight, Universal Focus, which became Focus Features. And these companies became the major players in this independent world. So what ended up being established was a system whereby filmmakers wanting to get into filmmaking and wanting to become filmmakers, if you will, would make their projects, and the first sight on their horizon was to get a film purchased by one of these distributors because it would have the corporate muscle behind it and it would be pushed out to theaters around the country. Well, it worked out pretty well for a little while. Some companies like Sony Pictures Classics, obviously owned by the Sony Corporation, have had a long history of having consistent success at this. Their niche is purchasing international films from around the world, and that aren't being shown here, being released here, and releasing them in a handful of theaters in New York or LA, and they're hoping for modest success. And they've been getting it, and they continue to get it. Other companies, however, took bigger gambles. Like last year we had There Might Be Blood, or There Will Be Blood, as was a good example. Cold Mountain with Miramax was a good example. These were companies that took big leaps. They suddenly began spending the kind of money that the parent companies would spend on a major film, the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And that really changed the game, because suddenly it went from a business where you were looking to make a couple $1 million on a film and do it consistently and make modest profits and really push art film out there and really acquire the films that nobody was seeing into, let's get the biggest celebrities we can get into it, let's get it out into as many theaters as we can get it to, let's sell as many tickets as we possibly can cram people into. And that's the business model of the parent studio. And as long as you're making big commercial successes, then it's going to work. But if you don't have the pocketbook to support that, as most of these specialty divisions didn't, it doesn't last very long. And what we've seen literally this year in the last 6 months are a number of them closed down. Paramount Classics closed down and folded its division within Paramount. Warner Independent closed down completely. Any films that were to be due out by them were now going to be released by the parent studio. Tartan Films, which is a small European distributor, had an office. They closed down. There's a lot of these independent companies, these specialty divisions, in this year, literally in the last 8 months, have shuttered. They've closed down because they can't make it work. It's not entirely the fault of the distributors, perhaps. This business model that I spoke of trying to get singles and doubles versus home runs, it's also a changing marketplace. In the last 15 years, the number of art house cinemas around the country has dropped dramatically. And the movie-going public has been trained. We're all trained. If you really think about it, when you think about cinema today in America, it's just not geared toward art or geared towards experiencing a diverse slate of perspectives. It's geared toward what's the big thing that weekend. I'm sure you've heard other people talk about, once Jaws hit, the whole industry discovered that, wow, we can make hundreds of millions of dollars instead of just a couple million. And we can, if we put all the marketing money behind a film, a title, we can explode it and we can have lines around the block. And as long as we have enough films and we push it out there fast enough, and so we have another one next weekend, and we just keep doing that, and we have this intensity that you have to get to this film this weekend and then it's over and it's gone, I guess you can sustain that.